8 years or so ago, I did the first one of these in a little room at Amnesty in North London, and there were 28 of this there. I think Ben may have been there, although I may have misremembered. And now Katie just let me know that today for this one, we've got 831 people logged in from the UK and around the world. Whilst, clearly fundraising isn't about numbers, but the notion of being able to help so many people really makes me very happy. So thank you for making time to be here when you could be lots of other places. I'm going to do my utmost to make sure that this, it pays you back across the next hour or so. If you've not been to Breakfast Club before, and I appreciate there'll be quite a few people who haven't been before, I'm trying to do two things across the next hour or so. Number one, that the experience and the examples and the ideas should help you. And number two, that some of them you might choose to pass on to your team. We record this whole event so you can share that recording when we send it out to you, if you like, or indeed kind of share the ideas, or indeed share any of the other resources, the free resources like the podcast episodes, which are clearly available in the public space. So how will you get the most to pay you back for the time you spend here? Number one, I really recommend you might have a notebook out, or just pen and paper, somewhere to record the 2, 3, 4 ideas or insights you get. What makes the world a better place, raises more money, is not being impressed by Ben's story, although we'll try and do that as well, and entertain and interest you. What makes the world a better place is something you might do differently tomorrow because of these ideas you get, and that's only most likely to happen if A, you write it down as it goes, as you get the idea, and B, building in that time to reflect and think about it and work out how you might use it. Maybe build in time to discuss the ideas you like with a colleague. We won't have loads of time, and I'm sorry in advance for that, because it's just such a big topic, but we plan to have maybe just time to at least just 1 or even 2 questions at the end of Ben's talk. So if you do have a question based on what Ben talks about corporate partnerships, belief and negotiation, then if you could put question in capitals in the chat, then it's most likely Katie or I will be able to find that question. In terms of the structure, in a moment, I'm going to talk about a couple of free resources and a couple of highlight messages from the last couple of Breakfast Clubs. Then Ben's going to do his keynote talk about valuable partnerships and how you can increase your belief for talking to your colleagues and indeed talking to companies about just how valuable these things are to the company, so that you get the value that is due. And I'm going to do a talk on one of my favorite topics, which is how you, especially as an underdog, you can cut through the intense competition by applying what I would call the wow approach, the wow moments. And we're going to get you finished by 5 to 10 so you can get on to your next meeting, no problem. We had got such lovely feedback 3 months ago when Mel and Esther came along from Leeds Hospital's charity to Breakfast Club, and they talked about how they've achieved such wonderful growth in individual giving for the charity. And Mel has led on that project in individual giving, and she shared these beautiful resources, which I think are a lot of the reason why. I mean, the resources come out of the mindset and the philosophy is warmth and genuine relationship, rather than this more formal way of talking that many charities default to. And like I say, this warm personal tone of voice comes through in all these resources they developed. Again, it may be obvious to you, but not all charities necessarily would that Mel's introduced herself within the regular newsletter so that the people know who it is that's sharing these wonderful stories. So this is really obvious stuff to many of you, and yet I know it's not always easy to do in practice. So I think this one isn't yet on YouTube, but basically the last 4 Breakfast Club recordings are on our Bright Spot Fundraising YouTube channel, and we'll put this one up very soon. Secondly, the one in the autumn in September, Alice and Sonia, they both from different organizations, but they both talked about the concept of the thankathon. Sort of on 1 day a year, 1 week a year, you deliberately get loads of proactive thanking calls and cards done, not just by fundraising colleagues, but also when possible by the board and the chief exec and non-fundraising colleagues, and the power of that. And so that one is there on our YouTube, but equally, if it's a neater way to listen to the same ideas, you might check out episode 103 of my podcast, Fundraising Bright Spots, because Alice tells the same story there. Last time I got an email from her colleague, Sian Underwood. She said they did another mini thankathon just before this last Christmas, and it had a huge positive effect on their big give results. She talked about one particular already generous donor got this proactive thank you call, and he quadrupled the amount of that regular already generous gift. So you can see where the growth comes from doing. I know this stuff is obvious, but listen to episode 103 if it could give you or your colleagues a prompt to plan a thankathon special event from within in the next 6 months. It really, in terms of results, they said they've reduced individual giving cancellations by 5%, which Sian and Alice said to me is massive for them, given how important regular giving income is for them. But I need to get my slides away and stick to time. We're just about on time so far. So Ben, if you want to start to bring your slides up, it is my huge pleasure to introduce you to my good friend, Ben, and my colleague at Bright Spot. Many of you know him because maybe he was your coach on our corporate mastery program. Maybe he's been out to deliver one of our training days to your team. He's done a lot of these in the last few years, or maybe you've never met him. Anyway, Ben, when he was at the NSPCC for 17 years, he did a range of roles actually in the first 4 or 5 years, but then he settled for a long time, for 10, 12 years or so, as a specialist in corporate partnerships, and in particular winning new business. And his track record is extraordinary in achieving really big partnerships consistently with his team there. And he's also, like I say, an associate of Bright Spot. Anyway, Ben kindly agreed to prepare a presentation on ideas for this key thing of how do you get a greater confidence that partnering with us, the charity, is genuinely valuable to the company. So of course, philanthropy and kindness is part of it, but oh my goodness, it's so valuable to them too. And it's easy to say that. To emotionally get it and therefore be strong and proactive in your negotiations and your strategy is, I've found, not necessarily easy for many charities for lots of obvious reasons. So thank you ever so much, Ben. Over to you if you could share a couple of those ideas you've shared with our mastery program participants in the past.
Thank you very much, Rob, and everyone for coming here today. Lovely to see you all. Genuinely, I think everyone should start their day being introduced by Rob Woods, because it will really give you a sort of psychological boost to your life and your feelings and your belief, which I think is sort of a theme from today. Thanks, Rob. I think you did my introduction really well. Lots of the things I'm going to talk about have come from the various experience that Rob just described. And out of all the different bits of fundraising that I have worked on, which have mostly been sort of high value fundraising, whether that's philanthropy or companies or trusts, I've been working heavily in corporate partnerships for the last 10 years. And I know I'm biased. And if anyone has heard me talk before, they'll know I'll say they know what's coming next. Genuinely, I believe that there are not many other areas of fundraising that can have this sort of impact on your charity. Corporate fundraising, corporate partnerships, in the cases of the people that I've coached on mastery courses in my own career, it has been the difference between us reaching, in some cases, 15,000 families compared to 4 million. It's been the difference between us being there during COVID and not. It is the difference between us meeting new donors and not. It's the difference between services getting whole new strategies and not, and clearly the difference between income. Genuinely, I believe corporate partnerships can make a massive difference to your results, but because they have this huge potential, they're also pretty tricky. And I'm excited that today there's some things that get in the way. I'm not going to cover them all today, but there's one or two that I think today's talk are going to help you with about increasing your belief and your state and realizing the value that we bring. And this slide in particular, I've done lots of things. I was on supported care for a while. I was in philanthropy. I was very lucky over 10 years ago to work with Rob as a training manager. And And at that point, I think I ignited my obsession to go into the detail of when things have worked, when we have brought in money, when we have won a partnership, why did it work? And almost more importantly, when it didn't work, what are some things we could have done differently? And so, do you know, for the last 5 years, I have been unbelievably lucky that my job has been half training and coaching people across the world through Bright Spot and some of you here, and also the other half delivering these partnerships. So I promise you the things that I'm talking about, some of it has come from my own experience of having to sit and negotiate with a company that doesn't necessarily want to give money or take a meeting. And the other things have come from training and coaching others on our mastery courses and in our bespoke content too. Here's one thing that's been Rob, you always say success leaves clues. One thing that we noticed really early on, and I've noticed this at the NSPCC. So 17 years I was at the NSPCC. And one thing I noticed is that fundraisers who deliberately chose to spend time volunteering or connecting to the front line of our work. So for instance, at the NSPCC, that's Childline. Fundraisers who deliberately decided to do that were actually the fundraisers that were more likely to get success, to raise more money. Like if you looked at the top few fundraisers across each team, I could predict that among them will be somebody who is also in their spare time a Childline counsellor or turning up at an event when others don't. Like success looked like people who spent at least, you know, 1 day a week, but a few hours, sometimes just minutes a week, connecting themselves to the cause, to the work. In NSPCC's case, to children. I think I've got Max is on the call. Max, I remember you telling us about your team and how you just encouraged them to volunteer at more things in the local community and more of it. And it's no surprise, I was a counsellor myself, that if I spend a few days a month, just a matter of hours, connecting myself to the children that we help, the stories of where we help, it will shift my belief, my confidence, my likelihood to continue when things are hard, my ability to. It's no surprise, I think, that the more people connect to real examples of where their work makes an impact, the more likely it is that they'll help donors. The more you believe in your impact, the more your donors will believe in your impact. And that is pretty obvious, I think, when you look at the heart of it. And lots of the days I deliver for Bright Spot are storytelling days where we go into the heart of the impact of our work. And that is, do you know what? 99% of the time, people increase their confidence and likelihood to influence others just because they spend more time connecting to the stories and the real examples of where their work makes an impact. Now, here's the interesting thing, is that shifts our whole belief in that our charity is making an impact. But when we look at corporate partnerships, that same sense of belief and confidence isn't always there. And again, if anyone's seen me deliver a presentation on corporate partnerships, this won't be a new slide to you. I noticed that there were some charities where their results had changed. And I noticed in myself and my team at the NSPCC, things shifted when we changed our own belief and our own state thinking about corporate partnerships. Because I hate to tell you, but 90% of people, the way we think about corporate partnerships is wrong. I don't think we believe we're on a level playing field with the companies that we're talking to. I think sometimes we feel a little bit like we're begging. And by the way, if this sort of sentence seems familiar, it's stolen straight from a TED talk that is now 10 years old by someone called Dan Pallotta. I think many of you smart fundraisers on this call, I think some of you would have seen this TED talk where Dan Pallotta beautifully articulates why the way we think about our charities is wrong. 10 years ago, he did this session where he shows so many things, but there's this one slide that sticks with me. If you go to Stanford University and get an MBA and leave with your MBA, within 10 years, your salary will be $400,000 on average. If you are a CEO of a medical charity in the US, the pinnacle of that medical charity, your salary will be about $230,000. And if you're a CEO of a hunger charity or the average charity across the US, it will be $84,000. In other words, within 10 years of leaving university, you'll earn more than 4 times more on average than a CEO at most charities in the US. And Dan Pallotta said this talk 10 years ago to say, it's not fair that most people view the charity sector as something that is this little addition, and it couldn't possibly go toe to toe with companies or the for-profit sector. And that was 10 years ago. And the same thoughts, the same beliefs, I think, are affecting the way that corporate fundraisers and charities think about how we approach businesses. And I think it affects the way in which we talk and the way in which we negotiate and the way in which we turn up to pitches. In fact, I know it does. And so today, for the next 12 minutes, I'm going to help you to be able to find, keep, and use examples that will go against the grain of what's currently out there, where I think you've probably been in meetings where companies feel like, I'm helping you enough. Do I really need to give you that amount of money? Like, you've been in meetings where you might not feel like the charity is at the same level as the company. And yet, if you just Google image the word negotiation, pretty much every image shows people trying to get on the same level to be able to demonstrate what a real partnership is like. And I think one of the places where lots of charities struggle is that we don't always have the evidence or believe that we should be at that level. So I'm going to help you with 3 quick tactics to help you find more of these examples, keep more examples, and use more of these examples. And don't worry, even if you think you might not have them yet, I'm going to help you with some to try and find them. The first one, helping you find examples to help change those results. What sort of examples am I talking about? I'm saying, let's find examples of where a company has done something with your charity, could be anything, and then afterwards, their life has been made better. Now, this can be as tiny as the feedback that we get often is after someone from a company has met us and talked to us about the need for our work or the impact of partnerships, the feedback we often get, and we've got emails left, right, and centre from this. And after I've delivered a storytelling day, I get excited fundraisers emailing me this back to. Do you know what the marketing director said, or the CEO said, Ben? He said the 45 minutes where he met my charity and had the conversation with me, those 45 minutes in his email, he said that was the best 45 minutes of my month. I felt so inspired after meeting you and your chat. Like, it could be as tiny as that. But the first thing I want to do is to ask you to try and get in touch with current or past partners and just ask them, what have you noticed from the things that we have done together? Have you seen anything change in the work that we've done? So I was talking recently to someone who's the head of Sky Cares. That is Sky, the company's sort of CSR corporate social responsibility wing, the community team there. And she said that the call center staff at Sky, they're quite used to people calling in and complaining, as you can imagine. If you're Sky call center staff, they get inundated with them. When the pandemic hit, they realized that an awful lot of the people calling them were vulnerable older people who were calling with a request that actually could have been solved really easily. They were actually calling because they just wanted a chat. They wanted to talk. Sky Cares started partnering with Age UK to see if they could get the call center staff, not all of them, just a few of them, maybe 50 to 100 of them, the call center staff to, for 1 hour a week, volunteer so that they had sort of a befriending service that they could connect with. And what they did in that befriending service, where's my slide gone? There it is. That for 1 hour a week, they would call someone. Do you know what she told me? She told me afterwards that when they looked at the annual sort of appraisals for teams, the people in the top few percentage, the people who are coming out as the most talented people across the whole organization, there was a disproportionate representation of people who had chosen to sign up to the 1 hour of volunteering. Those people on the call center who'd chosen to sign up for 1 hour volunteering, they were also more likely to have better customer service scores and results. So not only did it help them to help other people, but the customers, when they called through, if you'd spent an hour volunteering, you were more likely to be better at your job. They were more likely to retain these members of staff. Ultimately, they found that they were more likely to earn Sky money. This is just from 1 hour of volunteering. Now, all of these are relatively anecdotal, but it was fascinating watching, her name was Nicola, watching Nicola's eyes light up when she talked through how just 1 hour of volunteering had helped her team. So my question to you is there a current partnership or a previous partnership that you can try and get a conversation with? I wouldn't just send them an email to say, have you got, last time we did something together, can you tell me if you've seen a better result? Like, have a conversation with them to see what you can hear. So for instance, I remember working with an FMCG brand, sort of one that stocks shelves on supermarkets. They're these sorts of brands. And we did have a meeting with them where they were telling us an evaluation of the campaign we did together. If you bought the product, a donation went to the charity. And they did give us some data on it that showed that, you know what, engagement online had been better. They'd seen more click-throughs on Facebook. They'd seen an increase when compared to other campaigns. But in the meeting with them, because it was a conversation, they also told us that, you know what, they said, as a team, out of everything we worked on, we enjoyed working on this just a little bit more. And so that got the story hunter in me asking the question, why? What is it about this that you enjoyed? Did you notice, I get a sense that you noticed things were different. What did you notice was different? Sounds like it's not always enjoyable to work on campaigns. And do you know what they said? Well, yeah, it isn't. To try and get our product stocked in supermarkets, it isn't always easy. And to try and get time in with a busy supermarket team is hard. But do you know what? Our 4 biggest supermarkets and chemists that we were working with, when we talked to them about this campaign, they were more likely to have a meeting with us, and the meeting was so much more rewarding. And I found that fascinating. I am not sure that if we hadn't have been in the room and asked them that question, you mentioned this was more enjoyable. What made it more enjoyable? What did you notice was different? That little extra question. I don't think without that, we'd have got these extra nuggets that actually said, do you know what? When you're trying to get in front of your busiest top clients and you're struggling, well, a partnership or a campaign with a charity can be the thing that gets you through the door. I don't think I'd have realized that. The team also told us that they won an internal award. It's a global company. This UK team that never normally wins awards won an internal global award for this. So again, suddenly, out of nowhere, I've got 3 really concrete examples. One, this tangible data point that showed click-throughs were higher. In fact, they did have a slight tweak in sales too. But 2, they found it better to contact their suppliers. And 3, as a team, they were internally recognized. It smashed hierarchy. Suddenly, in the same way that on a storytelling day, I would say, hunt out stories of the impact your charity has made to the people you're helping. Maybe you're beginning to see the theme here. I began to see, you can start to find stories and examples of where you have helped other companies. Some of my favorites are the work that we did in our mastery courses. And I know, Rob, you love to plug the podcast, podcast number 67. If you are particularly interested in increasing your belief that charity partnerships make an impact, then podcast number 67 is where Pippa talks about Family Fund, a small organization, Family Fund, and their partnership with McCain, which is still on TVs today, 3 years on from when the partnership was first launched. If you know anything about a company like McCain, then the amount of money they spend on advertising is precious. They will only advertise if they believe the advert is working. And the only advert that McCain has done that they've spent money on YouTube, on TV, in the middle of I'm a Celebrity, the only advert they spend money on is the one promoting their partnership with Family Fund, because they're aware that the story of what they do with Family Fund is having a better result with their customers than others. In fact, I saw a press release from January this year that they've decided to double their donation at the beginning of this year to Family Fund. Rob, I think you put it really well in the podcast. It doesn't matter, if you're interested, if one of your fears is I'm not a big charity, Ben, I don't know if we'll have this value. The value to these companies is not just about who you are. It's just as much about the audience who cares about your work. It's about the story and what you represent together than your brand. I'm going to keep going. More evidence. Do you know what somebody else that we were working with told us? That when they were talking to the company, when they asked a current partner to talk through the partnership, the campaign that they were doing together, that company had also spent money sponsoring a rugby club. They'd also spent money on a campaign on social media. And then a part of their marketing spend was on the charitable partnership, on reaching audiences together. And the charitable partnership was outdoing the KPIs of the sponsorship and of the social media campaign, quite dramatically, they said, to the point that it was almost getting embarrassing at marketing meetings. And the reason I like this, by the way, is, do you remember Dan Pallotta's graph that showed that most of the time we believe that the corporate world should be better invested in than us? Actually, what we find is a charity partnership with a company is more likely to help them, especially if the audiences match. We talk more about that in other podcasts, by the way, about how to select the companies. For now, I'm just about helping you to find these examples. So number one, please speak to current partners, speak to past partners, and don't just send them an email. Do whatever you can to have a coffee or a conversation. And if it is a current partner, then it is quite a powerful and empowering conversation to say, I want to get a cup of coffee with you, please, because I would love to, I want to make sure that the work we're doing together is making an impact. Can I have a chat to you and some of your colleagues? Even yesterday, by the way, I was talking to a corporate foundation, they're a big retailer, and their press officer was in front of me. Only 10% of her job is helping with the corporate foundation. And I asked her if she likes it. And do you know what she said? She said, I wish all of my job could be working with the corporate foundation. It is the best bit of my day. It's the most rewarding stuff. And I found that on social media and on other things, it gets the best response. I know that seems anecdotal, but the only reason why I'd have got that conversation, that content, is from having a Zoom chat with them and by hunting it out. So number one, find them. Then number two, keep them. One of my favorite examples of this is Louisa Dodd, who was on our corporate mastery course. I was very lucky to coach Louisa from Sustainable Restaurant Association. She said to me that after the course, they now do sort of weekly external focus sessions. So when people meet their donors, their supporters, their companies, they come back and she just asked the question. She said, I became obsessed with asking the question, what has changed since working with us? Have they noticed anything different? And she said they have these external focus team meetings where for about half an hour once a week, they just all download some of those examples. And she says she now captures them in her notes, and the next meeting she has with a company, she's very deliberately shares it. So my question to you is, okay, number one, if you are going to speak to current partners, number two, don't just keep it to yourself. How can you at team meetings share them? Where can you keep them? Can you put them into a pad? What can you do? And then the third one, can you put it into an evidence log? Can you put it into story pads? Number one, find them. Number two, keep them. Then number three, use these examples more. It could be when you're first meeting a company and you're using them to send the signals that partnership to us means we're on the same level. If I were Age UK, then I would probably say that for us, one of our favorite things about our partnerships is volunteering for them. We've even found that if you volunteer for us, it helps you to retain staff, and it helps the company to find some of their most talented people. So we're interested, what areas of partnership would you most like help with? Do you see how that's different? We're saying we can help you. Anyway, use them. Rob, I love this podcast, this example, and this is my final example, by the way. I'll be finished soon. I love this example of your podcast with Laura Matthews, who won a £200,000 partnership. And she said one of the things from the corporate mastery program was this theme: focus on the benefit that we can give a company. And the more she learnt about the company she was pitching to, the more confident she became, because she realized we could add benefit to their audience. We could add benefit to the challenges that they were having. And she says beautifully on the podcast that they went down the route in the pitch of how a partnership would be beneficial to them. They mocked things up. She said, yeah, it was clear. We did say that it would be good for us, but it would also really benefit you. And they rammed that home in the pitch using evidence that they had previously, using mocked up things. 20 minutes isn't enough time for me to tell you all the other tactics that you could use. But for me, I have to say, the other day I was on a coaching call with a mastery person who, in the beginning of the call, she was saying, I'm not sure we have these examples. And luckily I had trained her team with her. And I asked the question, do you remember in the room, do you remember talking to your account management colleagues about how something they'd noticed when they had started offering workshops and working with one of your companies? And when we started talking through, and she started recounting some of the examples of where the company's staff had increased their likelihood to do a particular action because of the charity, her state changed. And within 25 minutes, the conversation was about, we can do this. I should be picking up the phone and call. I do like Ted Lasso, and I wanted to get this slide in. But for me, whatever you can do, find ways to speak to current partners, to find them, keep those examples and share them with your partners. And trust me, if you spend just 15, 20 minutes, half an hour doing this, you'll notice your state change in meetings, in pitches, and in confidence.
Wow. Thank you ever so much, Ben. 20 minutes, I agree, is a really short time for such a big topic. I've just got several people, Faye and Melanie, a couple of other people asked a really good question, which is, if we're not yet working with corporate partners, so lots of that we can't do because we haven't already got those examples, what do you think the options are for people in getting that belief from other people's examples? Is it just as valid to be able to use other examples that prove that partnering is good for companies? What would your answer be while I bring my slides up?
Thank you. So I think there's two things. One of them is, you're absolutely right. I before we had those sorts of examples, I got my own belief from, so there's a brilliant Unilever video at 60 seconds long that shows the impact that charity partnerships has had on their brands. But you know what? I got my belief. I talked to the director of marketing, the agency that helps Make-A-Wish Foundation, and he told me about how December is the most profitable month of the year for Fairy, the agency that helps Fairy and Make-A-Wish. He told me December was the most profitable time of the year for Fairy because of the partnership with Make-A-Wish Foundation. And he told me 3 interesting nuggets. And for me, before we had our own examples, once I'd realized that the company I was talking to shared an audience with us, and actually they agreed that the sort of charity that we were made sense. Once we'd had a conversation about that, I did use examples. Like I said, a marketing agency has told me their most profitable time of the year is the charity partnership they do with this particular charity. And one of the reasons they said is because that charity seems to match their audience so well. So for me, Rob, yes, I would hunt out and use examples, even if it is, I heard from a charity where their staff volunteered and they were more likely to be retained. By the way, yesterday, the foundation I was talking to, they wanted to figure out how to engage their colleagues internally and their sales teams. And I asked them, have you noticed the teams who do more fundraising for you, is there any difference in they're a retailer, is there any difference in their normal retail results? And she said that without a doubt, Ben, the teams that we've noticed do more volunteering and more fundraising and do more with the charity, they also are the ones that get more sales. The teams seem more together. And it was fascinating. It doesn't, for me, it matters less about who, that it's your examples, and more about that it's that it's the sending the signals. If the audience matches, if you agree that we're a cause that makes sense to you or your staff, but benefit will come. I promise you that, because of all these other examples.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, I do recommend people check out that Unilever video you mentioned. It's really strong. But at its simplest, my top tip for this really good question that Melanie and others were asking is just listen to 2, 3, 4 of the podcasts that Ben and I have created, or that I made with Pippa, episode 67, and so on, and just really tune in to the truth of this story. Know the story inside out, so that you can use this, what I would call big fat claim, when it's your turn to do the talking to the company, to give references that McCain are clearly getting lots of value from partnering with this, interestingly, really quite small brand. Family Fund aren't any bigger or more well-known than many of the charities on this thing. And it's really valuable to McCain. And, there's a really powerful one about a tiny charity in Singapore. There's a YouTube video of IKEA and Homes for Hope. IKEA and Homes for Hope. Check out the YouTube film. It's just 60 seconds long, but a tiny dog rehoming charity partnering with mighty IKEA. The story is so compelling and interesting about how it's good for IKEA as well as for the rehoming of the dogs. So if you're not currently doing it, my top tip would be just study and listen to as many examples of these as you can, so that you have the references to pass on and send your certainty that it's good for the company to them via these stories. Said differently, I really, whilst it's nice and useful to have ones to do with your charity, the bigger thing is, can and should partnerships be good for the company as well as the charity? Yes, but getting to that point might require some extra homework and of listening and so on. But hopefully the way we do those podcasts won't be a chore. You can just absorb that belief in those stories while you're commuting or doing your exercise. Ben, if you just hang about for a moment, because in a moment it'd be great to really top line here about what you're doing from now on. But I know that right now many people are looking at budgets, and just in case you've got some training budget that needs to be used up, and you've got maybe you already listened to my podcast, or you've already done the training day with Ben, you know that our approach does tend to work, then one of the best things you might consider doing, I think, is getting a team membership for Bright Spot Members Club. Many of you members are already in this session anyway, but if you don't know about it, there's lots of my best training films, some of them made with Ben, some made with other guest experts. Each week we do a 1-hour live workshop or masterclass, and it's better than half price if you sign up your team compared to individual memberships. I mean, by all means, sign up as an individual via the website, but contact me if you're interested in hearing about that. Secondly, our mastery programs. These are our flagship programs, which we started 9 years ago when we felt that, complex, ambiguous topics like corporate or major gifts, really 20 minutes isn't long enough to really truly master it, nor indeed is a one-day course. So I started doing these 6-month mastery programs, master classes with me, split up over time, plus one-to-one coaching with Ben and others. And lots of other resources across 6 months. We found this is the best way you can make a genuine lift in skill, confidence, and results. They start again in May, these programs, and it's a combination of all kinds of resources to help not just get the ideas, but also support it in the implementation. The year version is Platinum 2,800. Most people don't do the year because the 6 months is very powerful. But if you are interested, then I would get in touch today. I don't know if my colleague Katie, if you're able to put the form in the chat box soon, Katie, so that people can express interest and find out more. I mean, by all means, look at the stuff on the website, but if you want to set up a chat about it, do it today or do it soon, because there's a really powerful, valuable incentive. We've got about 9 days left. So if you get in touch before the 31st of March, then there's a valuable £400 discount on the price of both major gifts and corporate mastery programs. It comes down to 1,695. I haven't got time to say all about how the content and so on. The theme Ben just zoomed us through there. is just one of many themes we really take our time on and go into depth and help you with the practicalities. All I say is, after doing them for 9 years, with hundreds and hundreds of fundraisers being helped through our mastery programs, we just know that they work. And the reason, I put my money where my mouth is, I know that they work. So if you're not, they help you raise more money through that momentum. If you're not really pleased by the end of day one, you can just let me know, no pressure, and I'll give you all your money back. And I'm so sure that's unlikely to happen, is that if that ever happened, I would give you £500 donated to your charity. So whatever happens, you walk away up on the deal. That's how sure I am that these programs make a powerful effect to your momentum and your results. Just before I move on to my presentation, Ben, I know that a lot of what you've done for Brightspot till now has been coaching on the mastery programs and delivering our sessions as team days, like the storytelling one. But there's this other element you're now adding to the support Brightspot can offer. Could you really top line suggest what that might look like, just in case there's some people out there who would be interested in finding out more?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. So, do you know, quite often after I've delivered a day with a charity, especially focused on corporate partnerships, like one thing I know, corporate partnerships, it needs to take our entire organization with us. We just can't do it on our own. We need the help of everyone. Sometimes that's the people who design the services. Sometimes that's your finance director. Sometimes that's your board of trustees. And we like to think that they can all go with us. Sometimes, one by one, they do things that unintentionally get in the way. And often a charity has asked me, Ben, can you come and help us in-house for a day a week or whatever it's needed to help increase our belief, our skill, our tactics, and one by one, team by team, learn what's needed to build these partnerships. And so I'm excited to say that I'm going to use all 17 years of experience, our mastery content, our membership sites, our training in-house with a charity to try and help one by one, person by person, to shift those results when sometimes it does just need that extra bit. And so it's quite exciting. Already we're talking to a few. I've been trying it out and it works. And so, Rob, yeah, I'm excited. It's sort of bright spot in-house across an organization, shifting everything. And I'm excited for it.
Wonderful. And so am I, Ben. Thank you so much for letting us know about that. And that won't be for everyone. But if you're curious about what Ben just said, then again, there's a bit in the form that I hope we've managed to put this form in the chat so you can register an interest, and Ben will follow up and have a chat with you, find out more about where you're at, and explain in more detail about how that process works. Okay, so shifting gear, I'm still determined to get you away comfortably before 10 o'clock by 5 to 10, but I've got about 22 minutes to share a short version. Again, this is I call it the wow moments for approach. My colleague Craig and I, the fundraising detective, we created this as an online course. It's called Wow Moments for Fundraising Success. So if you want to take a picture of that web address, fundraising-training.com/wow moments. That it's an e-course you can just do or get your team to do. So do check that out if what I'm about to tell you sounds interesting or valuable to you. Or get in touch. But the gist of it, both Craig and I, years ago, about a decade ago, we read this brilliant book called The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. And it's not a fundraising book, but it makes the point really interestingly about the psychology of how human beings experience time, not equally. The gist is some moments are much more important in our lives than others. And once you really get your head around that, and the implications for a company or a charity, the implications are really powerful, because you can just use your resources intelligently and efficiently for a lot of the time in order to survive. And just now and again, if you go the extra mile, commercially and for charities, we found it massively pays you back when you do go the extra mile and you get it right. Apart from anything else, hardly anyone else ever does that. And that's why you stand out. And that's where the massive value economically comes from. As an example, there's a wonderful little hotel. I think it's a 3-star hotel in the LA area. And yet, for the last, I don't know, decade or so, routinely on TripAdvisor, Magic Castle Hotel, humble little Magic Castle Hotel, is routinely in the top 3 most recommended places to stay in that whole massive area. And the other ones are like the Four Seasons or the Marriott or something. Like, how do they do it? What do they do? Well, several little things. In fact, Craig went and experienced their wonderful little hotel. It's an ordinary pool. It's not fancy. They're clean but ordinary rooms and so on. So as an underdog, a hotel or a charity, how do you punch above your weight with the resources you've got? Well, you create magic moments. And one of the moments is like in terms of refreshments. So if you're at the Magic Castle Hotel swimming pool, and it's that time of the day where maybe, everyone's a bit tired or getting a bit crotchety with each other in the family, maybe, okay, I know there are more elegant solutions as a parent, but speaking as a parent myself, sometimes the way I solve that problem is to see if we can cheer everyone up with an ice cream. In normal hotels, I would have to go and find a shop or, go into reception or go down the road. If you're at the Magic Castle Hotel, you just say to your child, oh, just go along there. See that red phone over there? Yeah, the popsicle hotline. I guess in British English, I'd call that the ice cream hotline. Just go and pick up that phone and see who answers. And what you do is someone answers the phone, and they're probably only 20 meters away in the kitchen of the hotel, and they say, popsicle hotline, how may I help you? And you say, oh, I'd like 2 raspberry ones and a blueberry popsicle, please. And then like 2 minutes later, they come out with white gloves and a silver tray, and here's your popsicle, sir. Now, I'm a middle-aged man, and I get quite excited about how that would lift my holiday. What would your children think about a popsicle hotline that's just there? Can you see how that might be a magic moment that just normally would not happen? So there is an example, but note, it's not very efficient, is it? Like, you can imagine in the brainstorm, they could have said, someone came up with this good idea and the joy it would create, and someone else would say, yeah, but like, why don't we just put a deep freeze there with a sign saying, help yourself? Can you see this? To wow someone is not always necessarily the efficient, and that's part of the reason why many companies and charities don't create wows, because often there's a voice of reason that takes all the fun out of it and makes it more dull and predictable. So what I'm going to do across the next 20 minutes is try and convey to you why not always, but sometimes for some partners, some donors, some events, some strands, it's worth going the extra mile in this way. The truth is, you could apply this approach, and our clients have, to pretty much any type of fundraising. Phoebe Cooper, our RSPCA, I think I saw some people from RSPCA, she liked this idea and her colleagues liked this idea, and they applied it to transforming people signing up for gift aid. She applied it to individual giving in terms of making things much more bespoke and segmented in the impact they were making to animals in their local area. You can apply the wow approach to pretty much anything. I've got time to just focus on a couple, and the areas I've chosen to focus on today are written applications and thanking and stewardship. So Chip and Dan Heath, in their excellent book, they say, well, we've broken it down. How do you create what we would call a good surprise, where someone is positively surprised at something that a company, hotel, or charity does? Well, what you do is, they say, break the script for how people unconsciously predicted what would happen, the lowest common denominator of how things work in life, break it in a positive way and plan to do so. And this is probably, apology, I know that some people on this Breakfast Club have heard this story before. I've got some new stories in a moment, I promise. But I couldn't resist, again, sharing the Joshi the giraffe story, because it still makes me smile. This is probably the 20th time I've told it. So, true story. Once upon a time, there was a family on holiday, and they're a bit late packing, so they had to leave in a bit of a hurry. And on the way to the airport, can you see how this happened? They discovered that the child's soft toy, called Joshi the giraffe, was not there. Oh, panic. Now, this is quite a big deal, isn't it? If that's the favorite soft toy. Now, there wasn't time apparently to go back. So I don't know. I guess one of the parents said, well, sorry, darling, but maybe Joshy's having a longer vacation than us. Now, I'm not sure the child's going to buy that. But anyway, that's what they said. True story. Now, can you imagine that happening in your family, those of you who have children? How high would your expectations be that the hotel would find the soft toy for you? Now, for that reason, when I got home, of course, I'm going to call the hotel, but I'm not going to guarantee, like I gave you a guarantee before, I'm not going to give a cast iron guarantee to the child that we will definitely find Joshy. I think in fundraising parlance, I would say you'd be managing expectations, wouldn't you? And if you're, it would be quite a good result, frankly, lots of the hotels I've stayed in, if 3 weeks later, if Joshy turned up, scrunched up in a jiffy bag and all his hooves up around about his ears and you had to dust him off, if you even got it back at all 3 weeks later, I think that would be a result, wouldn't it? Well, do you know what happened in this case? What happened in this case was 3 days later, a lovely, strong, robust, comfortable box. They got a nice kind of label on the front and they opened it up and inside was Joshy reclining on a bed of bubble wrap. And in his little hoof, he was holding a photo album. Isn't he having a nice time? He even helped out in security. Oh, and don't forget the spa, Joshy. Okay. Doesn't that make you smile? Makes me smile. It's not my child. It's not my Joshy. How do you think it made the family feel? Well, if you're thinking pretty good, did they just keep it to themselves or did they tell everybody? And I think this was, before social media was quite such a fundamental of daily life, or such a norm. But when people make your day and go the extra mile, you're right, even if it's not just social media, you just tell people, don't you? You show them the photo album. The reason I know the story is because the guy blogged about it. These photos are, out there on the internet. So this is an example of what happens if and when you go the extra mile and you get it right, you get the tone and the execution right. Oh my goodness, I think, you massively build revenue and brand because people want to go back there. They know the extra mile you go in terms of genuinely caring about them rather than just saying that you care about customer service. So in terms of fundraising, what is the wow moment strategy for fundraising? Like I say, you can apply it to legacies, gift aid, sign-ups, anything. How do you create? You've got to ask yourself this question with your team. How can we create positive surprise and or delight and or insight and or connection beyond the orthodox, beyond what most donors or supporters or legacy pledgers would have expected? On our corporate partnership mastery program, I share this story about Daisy, who came on the program several years ago from a small dementia charity, and she was applying to be the charity of the year of a wine company, and she filled out the form, which was their process. But then when she'd filled it out, she rolled it up inside a bottle and she delivered it to their reception, or like a message in a bottle. It might not have worked. In this case, dear listener, it did work. They got put through to the pitch stage. The panel were already predisposed to liking the kind of person who would take such a risk. She pitched really well as well, and they won the partnership. Well done, Daisy. So I share these kinds of examples to, not because you can't come up with the ideas yourself. Most charities I know do have some good ideas. It's just rarely on their own do you have the courage to dare to take the risk. And I find the more of these examples I share, the more people follow through and, when appropriate, take the right kinds of risks. Now, again, in terms of resources to deepen your belief, I recommend you might check out episode 120 of my podcast, Fundraising Bright Spot podcast, and the brilliant David Burgess. He tells the story basically of how he's learned a lot as a fundraiser from when he's on the other side of the fence and he's got to make decisions when there's funding rounds about who gets the money. And the last one he did, can just pause and imagine this. He said there were 250 charities applied. I said, picture if that was your job and there's 50 on the table there. Now make the pile higher by 5 times. Like, I know this is obvious in a way, but we have to emotionally tune into the truth of just how hard it must be for these people who are sifting through our applications. And Dave strongly makes the case that however good your service and worthy it is, if your form looks broadly like most of the others, life's not fair. There's a really good chance it'll just fade in with the rest. So I'm not going to give the detail of this, but shout out to the brilliant Matt Zakiri, who's just messaging me the other day, who is the star of this story. Broadly, when Matt applied to David Burgess's Apollo funding, Matt's one popped out compared to the previous 42, and it looked like this. So there's no form to fill in. You're just invited to, a couple of slides, tell us why the money would be a good thing for your cause. Matt, picture the normal applications. Now, this is what Matt's look like. I'm not going to read it all to you, but broadly, his application reads as a conversation between two people, two avatars. The top one, I think, is the Apollo, the funder, and the second one with the beard is Matt. And basically, hi, to kick things off, please tell us a little bit about your organization. And Matt says, certainly. Chapter provides support to people with severe and enduring mental illness in Cheshire West and Cheshire. And it goes on as a conversation. Now, you don't need to know the detail apart from just consider that as an interesting, different tactic. Now, you can't do it when you've got to fill in their form, but when it's an open, less criteria, this is what Matt does. One of the bits I like most is right at the end. This is the last bit. Thank you for your time, says the funder. Just one more question. Isn't this conversational format just a gimmick to make you stand out? And Matt says, well, of course, we hope it makes us stand out. But talking is very important to Chapter. One-to-one communication is the backbone of our support. So we thought there was no better way to showcase our work than by having a chat. Thank you very much for listening to us. I love that bit. Because he doesn't just hope the objection doesn't come up. He proactively foresees the objection and he addresses it. But most importantly, in terms of wow, he's taken a creative risk, but there's a rationale for why he does. The form has followed the objective or the function or the main idea, if you see what I mean. So this is a key thing. When I've been teaching this stuff for years, sometimes the good idea, it's enticing creatively, but you have to, they'll see it as a gimmick unless it makes sense to them after they've experienced your pitch or your conversation or your demonstration or your prop or your film. It's got to make sense after they've experienced it as to why you did it that way, and for there to be a thought through rationale that was why you made that choice. Otherwise, often they will see it as a gimmick. Now, again, I'm foreseeing that some of you are still thinking, well, that's a bit weird, Rob. I mean, I couldn't see us doing that or something. So my point is you don't have to do Matt's topic. I'm just saying, if you could find appropriate ways to stand out for the crowd creatively, then, some people might still be thinking, well, I'm not sure. If I was the funder, I wouldn't like such a gimmick. Well, follow the data. Matt follows the data. He said, when he can't do this every time, but when it's a cold application, he tends to be successful in about 1 in every 6. But when it feels appropriate to do this one, he's successful 1 time in every 2 or 3 applications, which is an extraordinary win rate. I think you will agree. So, his results have talked for themselves. Different kind of example, but still at the application stage. Again, if you want the more detail of the whole story, listen to episode 122 of the podcast. But Beatrice Sayer works for a wonderful charity called Magic Breakfast. She came on our Corporate Partnerships Mastery Program last year. Towards the end of that program, she decided to apply to the Times and Sunday Times Christmas Appeal 2022. And long story short, she took a creative risk, did a wow approach, in part inspired by these kinds of examples we'd shared on the program, and there was a happy ending. And it won't always be a happy ending. Sometimes you do the work and it doesn't pay off, but on this occasion, there was a happy ending. They were one of 3 charities chosen, and when I last spoke to her for the podcast, that had generated in just 2 or 3 months, £1.15 million for Magic Breakfast, a wonderful transformational difference it's made to their ability to deliver nutritious breakfasts for children who otherwise would go without and therefore struggle to learn. Do listen to the full episode, it's a half an hour, but top tips from Beatrice. Like I say, these work best when you in corporate fundraising, when you understand and appreciate their world rather than doing a creative tactic about your world. So that's what Daisy did. It was the wine seller's world with the wine bottle. The tactic that Beatrice used, I don't know, what would you do? Maybe it's obvious in hindsight, but what the criteria was, please send us 15 stories of the kinds of stories that if you were successful, we could use in our newspaper appeal. What Beatrice chose to do was to mock up at painstaking detail, like a Times newspaper layout, with the headlines and the subheaders and the tags and all the rest of it. And she sent through her application, and I can imagine very few of the other hundreds of people applying would have done it that way. And it worked because it was about their world as much as it was about the difference the breakfasts would make. It came across, I saw it, it looked absolutely amazing. To my eye, it looked exactly like a Times newspaper, and maybe there was a few differences that she couldn't. Now, again, she didn't have fancy design budget. She did it herself on Canva. Apparently on Canva, there's a setting where you can get newspaper templates. She worked really hard to get the font right, to get there are these taglines, depending on what section of the newspaper things fit into, to get all of the detail right. And top tip, you can have the great idea, but if you don't execute well and it looks a bit shoddy and they're having to make excuses as to wondering why you did this gimmick, then I think these tactics don't work. But if you're in, and Beatrice's one, she showed me kindly, is a really good example of how if you get the execution right as well as the good idea of the wow, then often it will pay you back. She acknowledges that it took an awful lot longer to apply this way than had she not. But she also said, if the risks are that high, the stakes are that high, then what have you got to lose? Either you apply and with a good shot of winning, a better shot of winning, or you don't. And she also acknowledged that working this way, it just feels right. It is more fun. Ben mentioned Laura in episode 92 of our podcast. Like, there was a mini wow there in that they got the insight that from the point of view of the pet store, a key useful thing would be if customers who just pop into their dog food or whatever are enticed to move around the store more. So great insight. Laura created this little treasure hunt, like quiz style tactic that would do exactly that when she went to pitch. But crucially, I think, again, it's going the extra mile. She didn't just stop with a good idea. She went and took what she'd got, and she talked to someone who works in one of the shops, the manager, and said, would this work? And she got feedback so that by the time she went to pitch, it really was a genuinely well executed, probably got the branding right and so on, well-designed thing that is more likely to deliver wow than if she'd just gone with the idea of we might try and do this kind of thing. So for all these fancy ideas, honestly, I enjoy the example from the wonderful Rachel at children's hospices across Scotland just as much, because it really brings down to a key twist on the wow idea. The gist of the story, she started working for the hospice in early 2020, that crazy year, and someone generously, who normally gave £50 per month to the hospices, they gave £1,000 in March 2020. And Rachel did what she normally would do as a good fundraiser, which is to try and make it special by writing a nice handwritten thank you card and sent it through. She didn't think any of it. She carried on broadly in that way, and the guy went back to £50 a month, and then she kept making extra little thank you calls where possible, offering coffee. A year later, this £50 donor changed their regular monthly gift from £50 per month to £1,000 per month, and in due course agreed to meet her for coffee. And she said, "You're so generous. Why do you support our hospice?" And he said, "Well, there's lots of reasons why I support your hospice generally, but I tell you why I upped my gift. For those lovely thank you cards you wrote me. Honestly, I was so surprised to get a handwritten, really just right tone thank you card from a charity that I called my wife in from the other end of the house and said, look at this amazing thing. They really appreciate it. Now, I'm telling you that story because many of you, well, that's just what we do. That's not so special. And that was Rachel's point. To her, she had been given the impression that to wow someone needs this extra level of risk or creativity along the lines of the two fancier, more surprising stories I just told you. And her insight was, it's not about whether I think it's creative, it's about whether it's thoughtful and personal and is a wow for the donor. And if they're used to getting bills and emails, and to them it's a surprise to get a nice handwritten thank you card or call, then that is wow just as much as the fancier, more extreme types of wow that you talk about. So at its simplest, if you're a leader of a fundraising team, I really recommend you get lovely cards printed up. These are from Go Live Theatre Project or Mousetrap as was. And if all of your team have got lovely cards on their desk and they manage to send 2 or 3 of those out every week, you are delivering wow, I think, in a really manageable way. So when the stakes are high, to sum up everything, when the stakes are high, wow might be the right tactic, but sometimes it won't. So you've got to be able to choose when is it or is it not worth going the extra mile in these kinds of ways. Sometimes efficient is better. Like that point I made is about the wine bottle is chosen because they're a wine company. It's got to make sense as to why you did the thing. I think Matt Zakiri's point brings that through. No, this is the hardest bit. You are just going to have to work harder sometimes to do these things, make them bespoke or do them well. But I think it's not possible to scale a business or a charity only doing efficient. There's times when you have to take a risk and go for it really effective, not just efficient. And I think that distinction is not necessarily obvious in many organizations. Like Rachel Katola's point is actually thoughtful and driven by insight and caring is often more important than wow, like super crazy creative, bigger creative risk seeming. But most importantly, like lots of these ideas, the popsicle hotline idea, the wine bottle, lots of these ideas could have just been had, but someone wouldn't have followed through. Honestly, 9 times out of 10 people don't follow it. Please don't take silly risks and do silly gimmicks. But if it makes sense, I dare you to take more risks and help your team be encouraged to go the extra mile when really, it is a good idea, because the reasonableness is a powerful soul-sucking force, I have discovered. Like I say, Craig and I have created an e-version of this course, much bigger than I've just said there. So take a photo of that, fundraising-training.com/wow moments if you're interested in that e-course for you or your team, or email me. Ultimately, before you go away, across all of what Ben shared and what I've shared, have you had an idea or two that would help you and or help your team? Like before you rush off to the meetings, at some point today, could you jot down what your ideas would be? Making some decisions now increases the chances that you will actually do the follow-up meeting. I mentioned some things that need budget. I know that lots of you have literally no budget, but if all you do is choose to follow up on some of these stories by subscribing to the podcast, Fundraising Bright Spots, then that would be my top tip. If you literally have no budget, but you want to get these references for companies gaining and references for wow moments, working, do subscribe to that one. But for those of you who do want to follow up with us about mastery programs, members club, team membership, or Ben's consultancy, then do fill in the form or just get in touch via the website. And I hope you're able to get away in time now. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you again in 3 months' time for Breakfast Club in July, I hope. Thank you for sharing and tweeting. Thank you for all the lovely comments in the chats. Thank you to my colleague Katie, and big thank you to Ben for coming along and putting so much effort in to share some of these ideas for the Breakfast Club community. Right, please do get away to your next meeting. Stay in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.